I created a game-changing AI tool that turned our bankrupt firm into a $200 million empire. But on my wedding day, my dad gave the company to my college dropout stepsister. When I questioned him, he tossed me $20, laughing, "This is your value." I smiled and left in silence. But the next morning, when they reached the office, I never imagined that my wedding day, the moment that was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, would turn into the day I lost everything I had worked for. But that's how life works. Sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who betray you in the most brutal ways. My name is Elena Carter, and this is the story of how I built an empire, had it stolen from me, and how I took it all back without mercy. I was never the golden child. That title belonged to my stepsister Madison. She was the one my father, James Carter, adored. It never mattered what she did, whether she failed, succeeded, or did absolutely nothing, she was always his favorite. Me? I was the one who worked hard, the one who stayed behind in Austin, Texas, pouring every bit of myself into Carter Tech, our family's failing business. While Madison was off partying and dropping out of college, I was spending sleepless nights coding, designing, and fixing a broken company. Carter Tech wasn't always a $200 million powerhouse, it was a dying business on the verge of bankruptcy when I stepped in. My father started the company years ago, but it was struggling, outdated, and had no future. I saw what he couldn't, a way to revolutionize the company through AI-driven marketing software. I spent years developing an AI-powered marketing tool, one that could analyze consumer behavior, optimize campaigns, and help businesses boost their sales like never before. It was my creation, my innovation, my blood, sweat, and tears that took Carter Tech from a failing firm to one of the most sought-after tech companies in the country. And where was Madison during all of this? She was nowhere. She had no interest in the company, she was too busy spending my father's money, hopping from one failed idea to the next. But despite her zero contributions, James still treated her like royalty. I should have seen the betrayal coming. I should have known better. The day of my wedding was supposed to be about love, celebration, and new beginnings. It was supposed to be the one day where I wasn't thinking about work, about Carter Tech, about fighting for recognition. I should have known better. The reception hall was filled with family, friends, and business associates, people who had watched me build Carter Tech from the ground up. I was standing beside my husband, feeling a rare moment of happiness, when my father stood up to make a toast. I smiled, expecting him to say something about how proud he was of me. For once, I thought I would hear the words I had been waiting for all my life. Then he said something that made the entire room go silent. "Today is not just about Elena's wedding," my father said, raising his glass. "It's about a new chapter for our family business, and I'm proud to announce that moving forward, Madison will take over as CEO of Carter Tech." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My smile froze, my breath caught in my throat, and my mind screamed at me to make sense of what I had just heard. I stared at my father, waiting for him to correct himself, waiting for him to acknowledge that this was a joke. But the look in his eyes told me everything. This was planned. This was real. The murmurs in the room started. Some guests exchanged awkward glances, while others just looked away, too uncomfortable to meet my gaze. And then, just when I thought my father couldn't humiliate me more, he walked up to me, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. He placed it in my hand, smirked, and leaned in close. "This is all you're worth," he whispered. The room was dead silent. I could feel the weight of every single stare on me. I could hear Madison laughing softly beside him, basking in her new title. They were waiting for me to react. They expected tears, anger, a scene. But I didn't give them that. I took a slow breath. My fingers tightened around the $20 bill. My heart pounded in my chest, but I didn't let my face show even a fraction of the storm raging inside me. Instead, I smiled. A cold, calculated smile. I folded the bill carefully, tucked it into my dress, and looked my father in the eye. "Thank you, Dad," I said smoothly, my voice calm. "This means everything to me." Then I turned around and walked away. Not a single tear, not a single word of protest. Because I wasn't done yet. That night, while my father and Madison celebrated their victory, I sat alone in my office, surrounded by the empire I had built. The patents, the contracts, the files with my name stamped across them. They thought they had taken everything from me. What they didn't realize was that I had been preparing for this moment my entire life. They had no idea what was coming, and by the time they found out, it would be too late. I didn't sleep that night. While Madison and my father celebrated my humiliation, drinking champagne and basking in their so-called victory, I sat in my home office surrounded by everything that truly mattered: my work, my patents, my contracts, and the people who actually built cathartic alongside me. They thought they had taken everything from me. They had no idea how wrong they were. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to waste my breath trying to convince my father that he had made a mistake. Because he hadn't. He had made a choice, and now, so would I. At exactly midnight, I powered up my laptop. My hands were steady. My mind sharp. Calculating. Dangerous. I had been underestimated my whole life. That ended tonight. I started with one simple email. It was addressed to cathartic's top 20 clients, the ones who had signed contracts not with the company, but with me personally. In business, loyalty matters. And I had spent years cultivating relationships with the most powerful clients in the industry. Their trust wasn't in cathartic and certainly not in my father or Madison, it was in me. I reminded them of that. Attached to the email was a clause, one that had been written into their contracts years ago. It allowed them to terminate their agreements if I was no longer in a leadership role. Then I waited. At 3 o'clock in the morning, my inbox exploded. One by one, responses flooded in, all saying the same thing. They would not be renewing their contracts with cathartic under new leadership. They expected a transition plan for me personally. Millions of dollars in contracts gone. Cathartic was already beginning to crumble. But I wasn't finished yet. While my father and Madison were busy patting themselves on the back, they had forgotten one very important detail. The AI-powered marketing tool that had transformed cathartic into a $200 million powerhouse wasn't owned by cathartic. It was mine. Years ago, when I first developed the software, I made sure to register all intellectual property under my private company, Erupted Technologies. Cathartic had never owned it. They had only been granted a licensing agreement to use it, a licensing agreement that I had the power to revoke. And I did. With a few keystrokes, cathartic lost access to the one thing that had made them relevant. By sunrise, the empire my father had stolen from me was already on fire. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, I walked into the cathartic office. I didn't sneak in. I walked in through the front doors with my head high. Employees were whispering, some scrolling through emails, panic flashing across their faces. They already knew something was wrong. The entire office felt different, unstable, like a building moments before collapse. Then Madison stormed into the lobby. Her perfectly styled hair a mess, her face pale with shock. She shoved her phone toward my face, demanding answers. I glanced at the screen. It was an email from our largest client. Contract terminated, effective immediately. I tilted my head slightly. Oh, that? I said, voice cool. That's just the beginning. Behind her, my father walked in, looking just as shaken. He was dressed in his usual expensive suit, but there was uncertainty in his step, a crack in his confidence. Elena, he started, his voice lower, more cautious than usual. Let's be reasonable here. I almost laughed. Now, he wanted to be reasonable. I ignored him and walked past both of them, straight into the executive conference room. I tapped the screen of my tablet, and the large monitor at the front of the room lit up. I pulled up 3 documents. The first was my official resignation letter, effective immediately, stating that I was no longer affiliated with cathartic. The second was a file of termination clauses, signed by our top clients, showing they were walking away from the company because I was gone. The third was the legal ownership papers proving that the AI software, the very foundation of the company, was mine, and their license had just expired. I turned to face them. "You wanted me out," I said smoothly, watching the color drain from their faces. "Congratulations. You got your wish." My father looked at the documents, his hands shaking slightly. His voice was lower now, almost pleading. "We can fix this, Elena. Let's talk." "Talk?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Like you talked to me at my wedding when you handed me $20 and told me that's all I was worth?" Madison's smirk was long gone. She whispered, "You did this on purpose. You planned this." I met her furious gaze with an icy calm. "No, Madison. I spent 10 years building this company, and you and Dad took it from me in one night." I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "I just took it back." Before either of them could respond, the CFO knocked on the door. His face was as pale as a ghost. "James, we have a serious problem. Our investors are pulling out. Employees are resigning. And without Elena's software, we have nothing." A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room. My father, the man who once smirked and told me I was worthless, was now watching everything he owned burn to the ground. Madison, the so-called CEO, was frozen in place, realizing that without me, she was nothing but a title with no power. I grabbed my purse, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the door. Right before I stepped out, I turned back to look at them one last time. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the crumpled $20 bill my father had given me at my wedding, and held it up. "By the way," I said, voice dripping with amusement, "I won't be needing this." Then I dropped it on the table, turned around, and walked out. I never looked back. When I walked out of Carter Tech that morning, I knew I was never coming back. I had burned it all down. My father's arrogance, Madison's delusions, the entire empire they thought they had stolen from me. They had no idea how much damage had already been done, but they were about to find out. The real storm was just beginning. By noon, the news had spread like wildfire. The business world was buzzing with shock as reports flooded in. Carter Tech loses its top clients overnight, company in crisis, CEO shakeup leads to mass employee resignations, exclusive, Carter Tech AI software ownership dispute. What happens now? The media ate it up. Investors panicked. Employees scrambled to figure out their next moves. Stock values plummeted. And my father? He was drowning. At 1 p.m., my phone buzzed. "James Carter." I let it ring. Then came Madison. I let that one ring too. I had nothing left to say to them. But I wasn't done watching them fall. By 3 p.m., I was sitting in my new office, a sleek glass-walled space in the heart of downtown Austin. It was smaller than Carter Tech, but it was mine. Erupted Technologies was officially launched, and my core team, the developers, engineers, and top executives who had followed me, were already setting up operations. I sipped my coffee as I watched Carter Tech stock crash in real time. It was almost poetic. Then, at 4 p.m., the moment I had been waiting for arrived. A live press conference. James Carter stood at the podium, his usual confident smirk replaced with tight lips and tired eyes. Madison stood beside him, pale and shaken. The cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. "Mr. Carter, is it true that Carter Tech has lost 80% of its major clients overnight?" someone asked. "What is your response to reports that your former executive, Elena Carter, now owns all of the AI software rights? Is Carter Tech going bankrupt?" James cleared his throat, forcing a weak smile. "There have been some recent challenges, but Carter Tech remains strong. We are working on solutions." "Are you in talks with Elena Carter to restore the company?" someone asked. James visibly flinched at my name. That was all I needed to see. They had lost. Later that evening, I received a text from Madison. "Elena, meet me please. Just one conversation." I stared at the message. I almost laughed. For years, Madison had treated me like I was nothing. She had stood next to my father as he ripped my success away from me. She had laughed at my humiliation on my wedding day. And now? Now she was begging. I decided to meet her, not because I cared about what she had to say, but because I wanted to see it for myself. We met at a quiet restaurant, someplace she had picked, probably hoping no one would see her. When she walked in, she didn't look like the confident, arrogant woman who had taken the CEO title from me. She looked defeated. Her usual expensive designer dress was replaced with something simple. Her makeup was lighter. Her voice was softer. I let her sit first. I took my time before speaking. "So," I said finally, leaning back in my chair. "What do you want?" She hesitated, stirring her drink like she was searching for words. "I didn't know," she finally said. "I didn't know about the contracts, about the software, about any of it." I raised an eyebrow. She looked up at me. Her blue eyes filled with something I had never seen before, fear. "Carter Tech is falling apart, Elena," her voice cracked. "Dad is, he's losing everything. Investors are pulling out. We don't have the AI software and we don't know how to replace it. We're drowning." I tilted my head, faking curiosity. And she swallowed hard. "We need you to come back," she said. Silence. Then I let out a soft, quiet laugh. Madison's face twisted in desperation. "I know he messed up. I know what Dad did was awful, but please, Elena, you can fix this. You can save us." I tapped my fingers on the table. "Let me ask you something, Madison," I said. "On my wedding day, when Dad handed you everything I built and gave me $20, did you feel bad?" She flinched. "Did you think, just for a second, that maybe this was wrong?" She dropped her gaze. "I didn't think about it," she admitted. I nodded. "That's what I thought." I leaned forward, my voice calm but firm. "I spent 10 years building something out of nothing. I spent 10 years proving myself, only for you and Dad to rip it away from me in one night. You never cared then, so why should I care now?" Tears filled her eyes. "Please, Elena," she whispered. For the first time in my life, I saw Madison as she truly was, weak, lost, and without anyone to protect her. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel satisfaction. I just felt nothing. I stood up, grabbed my purse. "You wanted to be CEO," I said. "Then figure it out." Without another word, I walked out. Over the next 2 weeks, Carter Tech completely unraveled. Investors backed out one by one. Employees resigned in waves. The software replacement failed miserably, and clients refused to return. Then the final blow. The board of directors held a vote. James Carter was removed as chairman. Madison was forced to resign. Carter Tech officially declared bankruptcy shortly after. Meanwhile, Erupted Technologies soared. In less than 3 months, I had tripled my company's valuation, signed multi-million-dollar contracts, and expanded into new markets. I didn't just win. I dominated. And my father, Madison, they were nothing more than a footnote in a business world that no longer had space for them. One evening, after everything had settled, I received a letter. It was from my father. I didn't open it. I placed it in the same drawer as the crumpled $20 bill he had given me that night. I never needed his approval. I never needed his love. And I sure as hell didn't need his apology. I had proven my worth, not to them, but to myself. Because in the end, success was the only revenge I ever needed. In the months that followed, life changed in ways I never could have imagined. Carter Tech was officially gone, buried under the weight of its own failures. My father, James Carter, had lost everything: his company, his reputation, his influence. Madison had faded into obscurity, her brief moment of power vanishing just as quickly as it had come. And me? I was exactly where I was meant to be. Erupted Technologies thrived beyond even my own expectations. The same clients who had walked away from Carter Tech eagerly signed new contracts with me. With every deal, my company's value soared. What had taken Carter Tech a decade to achieve, I had built in mere months. Investors lined up to work with me, offering resources and partnerships I had never been given under my father's rule. The very people who once ignored my contributions now sought me out as a leader. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting for recognition. I had already won. One evening, as I sat in my office overlooking the Austin skyline, I found myself thinking about the past, the long nights spent building something only to have it ripped away. The years of seeking approval from a father who never saw my worth. The pain of betrayal. But none of that mattered anymore. The truth was, I no longer carried the weight of their rejection. I no longer needed validation. I had proven myself, not to them, but to me. A few days later, I received an invitation in the mail. It was from Madison's old business school, requesting that I be the keynote speaker at their upcoming graduation ceremony. The topic: 2 of 2. ChatGPT said. The power of underestimated leaders. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. The same institution that had once praised Madison as a future leader now wanted to hear my story. I accepted without hesitation. When I took the stage on the day of the event, the room was packed with eager young graduates, their eyes filled with ambition and uncertainty. I told them about my journey, not just the success, but the setbacks, the betrayals, the lessons learned. I told them about the night I walked away from Carter Tech with nothing but a $20 bill and my dignity, and how that moment had set everything else into motion. I watched as they listened, hanging on to every word. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just sharing my story. I was inspiring the next generation of underestimated leaders. After the speech, a young woman approached me, nervous but determined. "Miss Carter," she said, "what was the hardest part of your journey?" I thought about it for a moment before answering. "Letting go," I said honestly. Not of the company, not of the success, but of the anger. Of the need to prove something to people who never deserved my loyalty in the first place. Once I did that, everything else fell into place. That night, as I sat at home with a glass of wine, I pulled out an old wooden box from my desk drawer. Inside was the crumpled $20 bill my father had given me on my wedding day. For months, I had kept it as a reminder of where I came from, of the betrayal that had fueled my success. But I didn't need it anymore. It had served its purpose. I took the bill, smoothed it out, and placed it inside a photo album. One that held pictures of my journey, from the small, failing company I had once tried to save, to the thriving empire I had built on my own terms. I wasn't looking back in anger anymore. I was looking forward. Toward a future that was entirely my own. And this time, I wasn't carrying the weight of anyone else's expectations. I had risen. I had won. And that was all that mattered.